Hello everybody, my name is Christian Quick and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be making buttons and pressure plates. So stick in with the timestamps and let's get started with the video. Alright, and the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to copy the trapdoor and let us take this, we're going to call this button, and then we're going to call this button right here, B-U-T-T-O-N, and then we're going to call this over here the new button block. And the settings on this are a little confusing, so the best thing that I'm going to do is we're just gonna out this whole thing. So from button block. Let's go into blocks, and then let's, inside of blocks, take a look at, let's control F and look up the oak button. So here it's going to say, hey, that's why. And it's going to say create wooden block, and they split this into two categories. It wants you to use this private static, and this one over in here where it says create button block, but it's the both of them. Why would they have it do this? I have no idea, but we're just going to copy this bottom one. So just from abstract block settings, we're going to copy this whole thing in here, Control C, and then we're just going to paste it in here. And then for this, we are going to want to follow these sound groups. So for the sound groups, that's what this top one is for. So let us copy the block, just from block sound group, the on and off, Control C, and then just kind of paste it in this sound group here. And then it's going to say that there's yet another problem. So there is this click off and a click off sound, and then the click on and a click on sound. So let's put them in their proper places. So let's take just the sound events, Control C, and when we are going to take this in the click off sound, and then we are going to take our click on the sound events, Control C, and we're going to put that in our click on sound. Now that is all well and swell, and we are going to now get rid of all this except for the block sound group wood. We're going to keep that the same. And at the very end here, we are now going to do comma, the mod item group dot mod blocks, and now everything is perfectly fine. Oh, don't forget your end parenthesis. Now everything is perfectly fine. So if I downcompress this, we have all of our special settings, and then which is literally just the fact that it's basically non-collision, and then it's got a strength of 0.5 from the material of decoration. So I mean, this is our main settings. The most unique about it is literally the special sounds that it gets. But beyond that, it's not too complicated. When it comes down to the button in our data gen, we are going to make in our model loot table generator. Let's make ourselves the dark, the dark button. So we're going to add that in. So and then we're going to do the model, and then to do the block states, let's pull up. Let's pull up the model here. So we're going to open up our. Come on. Assets, Minecraft, block states, and then we have the Acacia button actually first thing in the thing. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to take Acacia, we're going to write in dark, and then we're going to take a look at the phases. So we have button, and then when the button is pressed. So those are the two things. So we're going to control F, and then the model gets placed everywhere because there is a lot of things that you can place it on. So you do get, is it on the floor, or is it not on the floor, and is it facing a direction? But most of it is, if it's powered, it's either going to be pressed while it's powered, or it's going to be button when it's off. So let's look up for Minecraft, and let's delete it and change it with your mod ID, and then take care of Acacia, and then turn it into dark. When you have that down, we can now go into the models, the block models. We'll take that all the way across. Assets, Minecraft, models, block, and then here we have button. And there's one called button inventory. Button inventory is them still wanting to not give the item a unique texture. They want to give it a block, but because the block is specifically like, if you don't want it just pressed or unpressed because it would still kind of be like 2D. You want it in like a 3D block model. That's why they have it like that. Um, if you know what I'm talking about, in the terms of like how it looks, But we'll take a look at it. We'll take a look at it in a second. Let's copy and paste all of these inside of here. We're gonna have to refactor and rename them all to dark, and then let's take a look at each of them individually. So in dark button, this is when it is not powered. It's going to take on to the texture, and then we're going to have HMH3, and this is going to look at our dark planks, meaning that we do not have to actually make a texture. Inventory is talking about the, let's say, the HMH3, and then this is also going to be the um, dark planks. I guess it doesn't explain it because it's in the parent, but it's fine. And the last one, HMH3, and then we're going to call for the dark planks. I could have copied the texture to all of them. That would have been a little bit faster. And then item, if I call for the mod blocks item, I believe because of we're going to call the inventory for this one. Yeah, acacia button. I guarantee it's going to be called for the inventory. Let's take a look. So we'll call the dark button, and it's going to be taken from parent dot, and then we're going to call for HMH3 dark button inventory, because this is literally, it's only used for when it's in your inventory. That's why it's called inventory. There's a couple things that are like that. I think the pressure plate actually might be like that too, but we'll figure it out when we get there. And I think like fences, some of the fences and fence gates, maybe the walls. But that is the models. So now that we have all the models and block states in, let us Control D and let us add in our lang file. Button. It's a button. So then we can call this dark button. And then we don't have to make a texture, so that's pretty good. But now we are going to need to work on not our loot tables, but we are going to need to make a recipe. And so with the recipe, we are also going to need an advancement. So let's go for data recipes, and then we have the button. So let's copy it in our recipes. And here we are just going to look, we're going to call it dark. And then we're just going to have to change the two things. So I personally get rid of the category in the group. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. We're going to call this dark planks. Make sure it is HMH3. And then for that, you'll get HMH, oop, not 2, 3. And then we're going to call this dark button. That is the result. So if you just put a plank in your crafting table, you'll get a button in your result. Pretty easy and simple stuff. Let us go in our advancements, and then let's take a look at anything that literally says dark. And then, so let's copy in here, and we're going to change the last one to button. And basically the reason I like this is because it automatically has planks up here, and then we are going to be calling for the dark button and the dark button recipe. Those are the recipe that we'll unlock if we get the planks in our inventory. So now we have the advancement loot table recipe completed. Let's just do the tags. So we're going to go through Minecraft for this one. So basically in the tags, if I do Minecraft tag block mineable and then look at the axe, because that would be something. Last thing I looked up was the trapdoors, but here there is another tag called wooden buttons. So because this is a wooden button, we're going to have to go inside of our blocks tag, and let's look up wooden buttons. And we're going to go in here, and then we're going to Control D, and then call this the HMH3, and then this is going to be called the dark button. Now, we did have a loot table, so before we open up the world, we are going to need to run our, I can't see all of it, we're going to need to run our data generation before we run the client. And then from there, we're going to see how it looks in the world, and hopefully everything should be all good and ready to go. Alright, and right away we got a new recipe unlocked, so let's go inside of here. We're going to put a button in our recipe. We get the dark button. We can place it on the ground. We can break it with our hand. It breaks pretty quickly. Does it break even faster with the axe? Yep, pops right off, and it does make the sounds, both clicked and unclicked. And then if I, just for an extra, just for all the giggles in the world, let's get some redstone and put it around. If I click on this, the redstone does emit. So that is the button. So now we can work on to the next one, which is the pressure plate. Returning down to our dark button, let's go and Control D, and then let's make this the dark pressure plate. And then we're going to have to call this the dark pressure plate. And then this is not going to be a button block, but a pressure plate block. So it's going to say, hey, something is wrong. You're going to need the action result rule. Let's just take everything and let's just basically delete it, because we're going to do the same thing that we did before with the button, which is we are simply going to look up our blocks, hit enter, and then from our last one, let's look up the pressure plate. Plate. And then from here, if we just look at like our oak pressure plate, it says we have our oak pressure plate, and then here it's talking about pressure plate block. Um, ooh, this might actually cause an interesting issue. I'm gonna try and let's just try and copy this thing and see if it gives me any sort of issue. Control C, go in the blocks, and then we're gonna Control V. Is there any kind of issue? No. Even though this is oh, well, actually, no, it's perfectly fine because it's still a pressure plate. I was thinking that we're gonna have to make a mod pressure plate. Totally wrong. So before we change this to oak planks, we're gonna go to the very end and right at the second parenthesis, let's do comma. Let's add in the mod item group dot mod blocks, and now let's change this to dark planks. And suddenly everything is perfectly fine. Let's go into the loot table provider, and we are going to do the same thing. We're going to Control D, and we're going to call this the dark pressure plates. So that is now in the loot table provider. And then we're going to have to do all the block states and all the shenanigans that we are used to doing. Let's go to Assets, Minecraft, Block States, and then here we're going to look at Pressure Plate. And then here we're going to do the same thing, Dark, and then I believe we're going to have the, okay, yeah, so there is pressure plate down. So we're going to Control F, and then this can only be placed on the floor, so that does make it easier. We're going to look up Minecraft, and then we're going to look up HMH3 block, and then we're going to change these to dark. And then I believe if I go into the actual models, the block models, uh, we will be asked to, there might be another inventory one. Pressure plate. No. Okay, that's perfectly fine. We'll see how it goes then. Models. We got okay, and then let's change these. Refactor, rename, and then we're gonna change this to dark pressure plates, and then we are gonna change this again. Refactor, rename to dark pressure plate down. And these are pretty simple ones. Let's full screen it for a second. And then for the top one, we're going to change this to HMH3, and then we'll call this dark planks, and then just to copy the textures because it is just easier to do it like that. Textures, HMH3, dark planks, perfectly fine. Do not change the parent or copy the parent. That will break the block. Or it'll keep the model the same, and then you'll wonder why. So let's look at the item models and take a look at how they did this item, and then we're going to look at the Acacia pressure plate. There it is. For a second I thought it didn't have one. I was like, wait a minute. All right. Dark pressure plate, and then we're going to come out, and then this is going to refer to HMH3, and then this is the dark pressure plate. So this is not when it's pressed down. This is the unpowered pressure plate. Now that we got all the models in, let's open up our lang file, go down, Control D, and then we are going to call the, put a little comma in there. Freaks me out every time the whole thing just goes like that. So this is going to be the dark pressure plate, and then we're going to call it just like that, pressure plate. Plate, not plane. I can only imagine. So now those are in, and then because the model is pointing to the texture of a texture that already exists. It's pulling it from the planks. We do not need to make an extra texture for this. We already made a data gen for the loot tables, but so we are going to have to start with the recipes. So this is going to take its own recipe. So if we go all the way back, go into data, recipe and then look up for the pressure plate. We're going to copy this and then we're going to call this the dark pressure plate. I personally like to take out the group and category, and then you can change this to HMH3, and then we'll call this dark planks, and then if you do that in this little pattern, the 2x2 pattern, you'll get your HMH3 dark pressure plate. And then every time you make a recipe, I would suggest making a not button pressure plate. I would suggest making an advancement for it. Pressure plate. All right, so every time if you pick up dark planks in your inventory, you will unlock the dark, the dark pressure, P-R-E-S-S, pressure plate. And then I'm just gonna copy this for sake of that. All right. So now that we have our recipe and advancement in, all we have to do is the tag. So go into your Minecraft, and then you would have to go into your tags, blocks, mineable for the X, because X is breaking down faster, and you can see that there is a tag for hashtag Minecraft wooden pressure plates, and because that is the case, we're going to look up wooden pressure plates. And then we're just going to add it to this one. So we're going to call this for HMH3, and then we're going to call it for dark pressure plate. And so now the tags are now in. So we are going to now, because of the loot table, we're going to make sure that we run the data generation before we run the client, and then let's take a look of how everything looks in the world when it is all done, and hopefully everything is working just fine. Alright, and we got ourselves a new recipe unlocked, which is a very good sign. We just need a 2. We've got our pressure plate unlocked. If I place it on the ground, it makes all the sounds. If I go in survival and I break it with my hand, that's great. If I break it with an axe, it breaks even faster. So now the dark pressure plate is working. It's completed. It is everything that we want to do. So yeah, that is everything. So that's going to be it for this video. So thank you guys so much for watching, and without further ado,